At my son's memorial, my daughter-in-law posted a selfie. Caption, finally free. She took my home, erased me from his will, and called me useless. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I moved out quietly. Weeks later, police found poison vials in her secret storage unit. The widow became the suspect. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The church was heavy with silence, broken only by the faint sound of muffled calls drifting from the pews. Candles flickered against the tall windows, casting pale light across the rows of mourners dressed in black. I sat at the very front, my back rigid though my chest ached with each shallow breath. 7 days. Only 7 days had passed since I buried my only son, Michael. He had been my life's pride, my heart's anchor, and now the void of his absence seemed to pull the air from my lungs. The priest's words floated through the cavernous room, meaningless syllables that slid past me like water against stone. Words of comfort, promises of eternal rest, assurances that time would soothe my agony. None of it mattered. There is no healing for a mother who has outlived her child. Michael was 42, brimming with brilliance, a man who carried both his father's vision and his own daring spirit. Too young to leave, too vital to vanish. And yet here I was, staring at his smiling portrait framed by lilies, wondering how the world could still turn without him. My fingers clutched a handkerchief already damp with tears. The fabric twisted tight in my grip as though it could anchor me to the earth. Soon I knew people would come forward with their rehearsed condolences, those empty phrases they repeated like incantations. He's in a better place. Time heals all wounds, lies wrapped in politeness. My wound was carved into the marrow of my soul. Time could not mend it. Then my purse vibrated against my hip. I should have ignored it, should have tucked it deeper into the folds of my dress and kept my gaze fixed on the altar. But something compelled me to reach for the phone. Some strange instinct that whispered I needed to see. Perhaps it was Providence. Perhaps the universe's cruelest joke. With trembling hands, I opened the screen. It was a notification from Instagram. Vanessa, my breath froze. Michael's widow, my daughter-in-law. She had posted a new photo. Against every instinct, I tapped it open, and the world tilted. There she stood, not in mourning, not in grief, but in triumph, draped in a sleek black designer dress that shimmered under the light of a mirror in Michael's own bedroom. Her lips painted the shade of ripe cherries, her face flawless as porcelain. No tear tracks marred her cheeks. No weight of sorrow bent her shoulders. It was the caption that sent ice rushing through my veins. The new queen of the Carter legacy. Moving forward. New beginnings. 7 days. 7 days since we laid my son into the ground, and already she was crowning herself empress of his inheritance. The empire Charles and I had spent decades building, the company Michael had expanded with brilliance and sweat, was now a trophy in her painted hands. I lifted my eyes across the aisle. There she sat, head bowed, the picture of a grieving widow. But now I saw the truth. Her tears were an act, her sorrow a costume. She had always been a performance artist, weaving masks to suit her audience. The doting wife, the delicate mourner, the virtuous hostess. I had seen through her from the beginning. Michael never had. "You're too hard on her, Mom," he would say with that exasperated smile. "Vanessa loves me for who I am, not what I have." He wanted so badly to believe, and for his sake I tried. But a mother knows. We always know. The service drew to an end, mourners rising slowly to their feet. My phone slipped back into my purse, my expression carved into stillness. Across the sanctuary, Vanessa's mask shifted. With the older guests, she played the fragile widow. With Michael's business partners, she leaned in closer, her voice lilting, her laughter just audible. I recognized the subtle changes in her posture, the tilt of her head as she charmed men whose signatures moved millions. Mrs. Blackwell, my oldest friend, slipped a hand over mine. Her eyes searched my pale face. "Evelyn, are you all right? Did you know about the will?" My throat tightened. I whispered hoarsely, "He left everything to her." Her brows knit together. "Everything?" I nodded, bitterness flooding my mouth like poison. "The house, the company shares, even the cottage that's been in our family for generations. And the prenuptial? Michael convinced himself it wasn't necessary. Her gasp was small, pained. I gave a hollow laugh that made her flinch. Now she owns it all. My gaze drifted back to Vanessa. She dabbed dry eyes with a handkerchief offered by Mr. Harrington, one of our wealthiest investors, her posture refined, her mouth curved just so, every gesture calculated. I leaned closer to Mrs. Blackwell, my voice steady now, iron forged through fire. I won't let her take everything. I won't let her destroy what we built. Evelyn, what are you planning? She asked gently, but I offered no reply. The plan had not yet formed fully in my mind, but the promise was certain. Vanessa thought she had triumphed. She mistook me for a grieving old woman too broken to resist. She had no idea who she was dealing with. When the mourners filed out and the church emptied, I remained seated. Only when the room was quiet did I rise, walking slowly to the altar. Michael's portrait smiled back at me, his eyes alive with warmth. The eyes I had loved since the day he first entered this world. I touched the edge of the frame, whispering so softly that only he could hear. I promise you, my son, she will not win, not a penny, not a legacy, not even a place at a table in this town. I will see to it myself. The candles flickered as though in agreement. Outside, the world moved on, but within me, grief began to harden into something else, something sharper, purpose. The morning after the memorial, I woke with an unfamiliar sensation. Grief still weighed on my chest like a stone, but beneath it, a thread of clarity stretched tight. Purpose. I could not bring Michael back, but I could guard what was his, what Charles and I had built for him, what our family had carried for generations. Vanessa Hayes might wear her widow's mask for the world, but I knew there was rot beneath her painted smile. I dressed carefully, slipping into the navy suit that had always made me feel powerful. My late husband used to tell me, "Know your enemy, Evelyn. To defeat them, you must first understand them." His words guided me now. If I was to stand against Vanessa, I had to uncover the truth that lingered in the shadows of her perfect act. My first stop was a modest car service on the edge of town. The small garage smelled of oil and coffee. There, bent over a clipboard, stood Frank Miller, our family's driver for nearly 20 years before Vanessa insisted he was no longer needed. His eyes brightened when he saw me. "Mrs. Carter," he said, helping me into a chair in the cramped break room. "I was at the service yesterday, though I stayed in the back. I'm so sorry about Mr. Michael." "Thank you, Frank," I replied, reaching for his weathered hand. "I need to ask you something important. It's about Vanessa." He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the coffee cup in his hand. "It's not my place to—" "Please," I interrupted. "Michael is gone. If she intends to destroy what he cared for, I need the truth." He exhaled slowly, the weight of years showing in his shoulders. "There were phone calls, late at night when Mr. Michael traveled for business. I'd hear her in the garden whispering. Once she asked me to drive her downtown. She told me to wait in the car, but I saw her meet a man. They seemed familiar." My stomach tightened. "Did you ever tell Michael?" "I tried to hint," Frank said, "but he just brushed it off. Said I was being overprotective, like you." My heart clenched. My son had been blind to the signs, wrapped in the illusions she spun around him. "There's something else," Frank added, lowering his voice. "The day before she dismissed me, I overheard her on the phone. She said, 'Once it's done, we'll never have to worry about money again.' I thought it was some business deal, but now," he shook his head, "now with Michael gone." The words lodged like shards of glass in my chest. The timing was too cruel, too deliberate. "Frank," I whispered, my voice unsteady, "before he died, did Michael seem ill?" "Not ill exactly," he said, "but different, forgetful, confused sometimes. We thought it was stress from work." I left him with gratitude and a promise to stay in touch, though the dread in my heart thickened. The pieces were beginning to shift, though not yet into a clear picture. From there, I went to Carter Holdings, the empire Charles had founded and Michael had expanded. The tall glass building glimmered against the skyline, but stepping into its lobby felt strange, almost foreign, as though I were trespassing in a place that should have been my sanctuary. The receptionist's eyes widened when she saw me. "Mrs. Carter, we weren't expecting you." I'd like to see a Gregory Hale, I said firmly, naming the attorney who had served our family loyally for decades. She faltered, making a call. I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter, he's in meetings all day. I'll wait, I answered, settling into the chair with a resolve that surprised even me. After 20 minutes, a door opened, but it was not Gregory who emerged. Vanessa stepped out instead, dressed in a sleek black pantsuit, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun. Her eyes flickered in surprise before smoothing into composure. Evelyn, she said with false warmth. What a surprise. I didn't expect to see you here. Evidently not, I replied, my voice cool. I'm here to see Gregory. Oh, she said, her smile sharpening. I just finished meeting with him. We were discussing the transition of Michael's assets. As you know, he left everything to me. Her words dripped casual triumph, as though discussing the weather. Rage burned in me, but I kept my expression calm. Yes, I'm aware of the current will. That's what I intend to discuss with Gregory. Something flickered in her eyes, worry, perhaps, quickly smothered. Well, I'm sure he'll explain that everything is in order. Michael was very clear about his wishes. Before I could respond, Gregory himself appeared, his expression tight, his gaze refusing to meet mine. Mrs. Carter, he said quickly, I didn't realize you'd be coming today. Clearly, I answered, rising to meet him. Do you have a moment to speak privately? He glanced at Vanessa, who gave him the smallest nod. That single movement told me everything. Gregory, who had watched Michael grow from a boy to a man who had been like family, was no longer on my side. He was hers. I have another meeting in 5 minutes, he said apologetically. Perhaps next week we can... That won't be necessary, I cut in. I gathered my purse, every step deliberate as I rose. I'll be finding new representation. Vanessa's smile bloomed victorious as I walked past her, but I did not let her see me falter. Outside, the sky was heavy with clouds, the city humming as though unaware that my life, my family, my legacy had been stolen. But I was not defeated. Not yet. For the first time since Michael's death, fire stirred in my chest. My enemy had revealed herself in full, and I would not rest until every mask she wore was torn away. There are moments in life when the ground shifts beneath your feet, when the world tilts so violently that nothing feels steady again. For me, that moment came the night after I confronted Vanessa at Carter Holdings. The storm outside rattled the windows of my apartment, but it was nothing compared to the storm brewing inside me. The phone rang, shattering the silence. The number was unfamiliar, but something in me urged to answer. Mrs. Carter? The voice was young, nervous, female. You don't know me, but I work at Meridian Pharmaceuticals. I was Mr. Carter's nurse during his last appointment 3 weeks ago. My breath caught. Yes, this is Evelyn Carter. There's something you should know. That day, Mrs. Hayes insisted on speaking privately with Dr. Carson. Afterward, Michael's prescription was changed. He had been stable on his old medication for years, but suddenly he was given a much stronger dosage. The walls seemed to close in around me. What kind of medication? For his heart condition, she whispered. The dosage he was given could have dangerous side effects. I thought it was odd, but when I asked Dr. Carson about it, he dismissed me. And when I heard of his sudden death, I couldn't stay silent. Her words struck like thunder. Vanessa had tampered with his treatment. She hadn't just stolen my son's future. She may have orchestrated his death. I thanked her, though my voice trembled, and when the call ended, I sat in the dim light, the pieces beginning to fall into place. Frank's overheard whispers, the suspicious phone calls, now the altered medication. The doorbell rang. My heart jolted, half afraid it might be her. Instead, a courier stood in the hallway, handing me a thick envelope. Legal documents for Mrs. Evelyn Carter. When the door shut behind me, I tore it open. My knees nearly buckled. An eviction notice. 30 days to vacate the home where I had raised my son, where every corner held memories of his laughter, his childhood, his triumphs. According to the papers, the estate now belongs solely to Vanessa Hayes. I pressed the notice to my chest, sliding down against the wall, tears finally spilling freely. That house was not just property. It was a life, a legacy. Now she meant to strip me of even that, as though erasing me would crown her undisputed queen. But grief did not drown me this time. Anger lifted me. A fire I thought long extinguished sparked again. If she wanted war, she would have it. The next morning, I packed the essentials, leaving behind marble floors and velvet drapes for the confines of a modest apartment on Maple Street. The walls were thin, the furniture sparse, but it was mine, hidden from her prying eyes. Before the sheriff arrived, I made certain to take what mattered: family photographs, Charles's rare books, Michael's childhood drawings, memories worth more than diamonds. It would not be the last battle, only the first. That night, as I sat among half-opened boxes, a knock rattled the door. Fear coiled in my stomach. But when I opened it, relief washed through me. Clara Johnson stood there, our loyal housekeeper for 2 decades before Vanessa dismissed her under the guise of modernizing the staff. She held a casserole dish, her kind eyes damp with emotion. "Clara," I breathed, pulling her into an embrace. "How did you find me?" "Frank told me," she said softly. "I thought you might need a friend." She lifted the dish. Lasagna, old family recipe. Tears stung my eyes again, this time for the warmth of loyalty. "You have no idea how much this means." Over dinner at my small kitchen table, Clara grew solemn. "Mrs. Carter, there's something I never told you. Something about Vanessa." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. Inside were newspaper clippings and court records. My hands shook as I read. "Her name isn't truly Vanessa Hayes," Clara explained. "She was born Vanessa Kowalski in Detroit, dropped out of community college. She's been involved with other wealthy men before Michael. Both men died unexpectedly, and she inherited everything. Afterward, she disappeared." My breath left me in a gasp. "Are you saying—" "I can't prove she killed them," Clara said quickly, "but the pattern is there. And one more thing, before Michael's death, I overheard her on the phone. She said he finally agreed to change it. Just a little longer, and everything will be ours." Ours. The word echoed like a gunshot in my mind. She wasn't acting alone. The walls of deceit were beginning to crumble, but the truth was even darker than I had imagined. My son had not simply died, he had been hunted. I sat long after Clara left, the papers spread before me, the evidence like ashes staining my hands. My grief sharpened into a blade. I would not cower. I would not let her claim his life and legacy unchallenged. She thought she had silenced Michael forever. She thought she had broken me. But she was wrong. The game had only just begun. And to you listening, stay with me, because the truth is about to tear open in ways even I couldn't foresee. Like, share, and subscribe if you want to see how far justice can reach when a mother decides to fight back. The apartment on Maple Street was quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against the ears. I unpacked slowly, each photograph and book a reminder of what I had lost. The walls were bare, the furniture sparse, but it was safe. More than that, it was hidden. Vanessa didn't know where I was, and for now, that secrecy was my shield. The knock at the door startled me. My chest tightened, dread whispering that she had found me. But when I peered through the peephole, the tension dissolved into tears I hadn't expected. Clara Johnson stood there, clutching her handbag and a casserole dish. I opened the door, pulling her into a hug. "Clara," I whispered, "how did you—" "Frank told me," she said softly, her eyes glistening. "I thought you could use a friend. I brought lasagna. It's not much, but it's warm." The smell filled the room, comforting in a way nothing else had been for weeks. "It's everything," I said, my throat thick. We ate at the tiny kitchen table, the familiar taste carrying me back to evenings when the house had been full of life and laughter. Clara's face, lit by the dim overhead light, grew serious. "There's something you should know, Mrs. Carter. Something I should have told you long ago." I set down my fork, bracing myself. "Go on." "It's about Vanessa. She isn't who she pretends to be." Clara reached into her purse and produced an envelope. Inside were photocopies of documents, newspaper clippings, fragments of a hidden life. Her voice was steady. "Her name isn't really Vanessa Hayes. She was born Vanessa Kowalski in Detroit. She never attended the school she claims. She dropped out of community college. And she has a history: wealthy men, sudden deaths, inheritances that disappeared into her hands before she moved on." The words chilled me. I turned over a clipping of a man named Edward Fleming, dead at 45 from an apparent heart attack. His wife, Vanessa Kowalski Fleming. The photograph showed her younger but unmistakable. The story was too familiar. "Are you saying—" "I don't have proof," Clara cut in, "but there's more. Before Michael died, I overheard her on the phone. She said he finally agreed to change it. Just a little longer and everything will be ours." "Not hers, Mrs. Carter, ours. She has help." The room seemed to tilt. The enemy was not only Vanessa, but someone standing in the shadows with her. I pressed the envelope against the table, my hands trembling. "Thank you, Clara. You've given me more than you know." After she left, I sat long into the night, the document spread before me, the truth clawing its way into the light. My son had been ensnared by a woman whose lies were stitched into every detail of her existence. He had not simply fallen victim to fate. He had been targeted. The next morning, I made a call I had avoided for years. The number rang twice before a crisp, practiced voice answered. "Diane Mitchell speaking." "Diane, it's Evelyn." A pause stretched over the line, sharp and brittle. My sister-in-law and I had not spoken since Charles's funeral 5 years earlier, when grief had splintered into anger over possessions that should never have mattered. Finally, she exhaled. "I heard about Michael. I'm sorry." "Thank you," I whispered. Then I drew in a deep breath. "I need your help." Her silence was thoughtful, measured. Diane had once been a federal prosecutor, sharp as steel, relentless in her pursuit of truth. "I'm listening." So I told her everything. Vanessa's sudden claim over the estate, the altered medication, the eviction notice, Clara's revelations. Each piece formed a puzzle more sinister than the last. When I finished, the silence on the other end was heavy with calculation. "Meet me tomorrow morning at Café Laurent, 10 o'clock, Diane said at last. "And Evelyn, be careful. If even half of what you suspect is true, this woman is dangerous." When the line went dead, I felt both fear and relief. I was no longer standing alone in the storm. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the apartment sounded like footsteps. Every shadow pressed against the walls like an intruder. I closed my eyes and saw Michael, not as the man he had become, but as the boy who used to crawl into bed during the thunderstorms, whispering that he was afraid of the lightning. I had wrapped him in my arms then, promising he was safe. Now I wished with all my heart I could have shielded him once more. But I had failed him, and that failure fueled me. By morning, I gathered Clara's documents, tucked them into a folder, and prepared for the meeting with Diane. The day was gray, the air heavy with rain. As I left the apartment, I felt the shift deep inside me. Grief had not disappeared, but it had transformed. It no longer paralyzed me. It propelled me forward. For the first time since Michael's death, I felt the stirrings of strength. Vanessa believed she had crushed me, that I was nothing more than a relic to be swept aside. But she was wrong. I was his mother, and a mother does not stop until justice is found. The weight of suspicion pressed heavier each day, but the meeting with Diane gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks: direction. She listened carefully as I laid out Clara's evidence, Frank's testimony, and the nurse's warning. By the time we left Café Laurent, her eyes carried the same fire that burned in mine. "You're not imagining this, Evelyn," she said firmly. "Every thread you've pulled points to something darker. If she tampered with Michael's medication, that's murder. We'll need the police." That afternoon, I sat in a small interview room at the Westlake Police Department. Detective Aaron Blake was younger than I expected, with calm eyes that revealed more than his carefully measured words. He flipped through his notebook as I recounted everything, my voice steady though my hands trembled. "When was the last time you saw your son alive?" he asked gently. 3 days before his death. We had lunch on Main Street. He seemed off, headaches, forgetful, repeating himself. The detective scribbled notes, then looked up. "Did he mention concerns about his wife?" I shook my head. Michael never wanted to hear criticism of Vanessa. He defended her even when I begged him to see the truth. Detective Blake closed the notebook. "Mrs. Carter, we've received information suggesting your daughter-in-law may have interfered with your son's medication. We're reopening the case." For a moment, relief and grief collided. I had wanted validation, but hearing it confirmed shattered something in me all over again. My son hadn't simply died. He had been killed. That evening, I met Diane at her home, the folder of documents spread across her polished dining table. Clara joined us, her expression grim. Frank sat nearby, his hands folded, the lines of loyalty carved deep into his face. For the first time, I looked around the table and realized I wasn't alone. This was no longer just my fight, it was ours. Diane leaned forward, her voice sharp with conviction. I spoke with a contact at Gregory Hale's former law firm. They confirmed Michael did change his will, but not the way Vanessa claims. The original version leaves you in control of the company and the family estate. This so-called new will is a forgery. The word echoed through the room like a gunshot. Forgery, I whispered, my breath catching. She nodded. Vanessa had help. Gregory's son has a gambling problem. She blackmailed him, threatened to ruin the boy unless Gregory cooperated. That's how she got this false document through. Frank clenched his fists. And all this time she paraded around playing the grieving widow. Clara's eyes glistened with anger. She stole from him while he was alive and poisoned him when he wouldn't die fast enough. The fury in the room was palpable, but Diane steadied us. We'll need more than anger. We need proof strong enough to stand in court. Handwriting analysis, financial records, witness testimony. Once the forgery is exposed, her empire collapses. As the night deepened, the plan began to take shape. It was imperfect, fragile, but it was ours. For the first time, the predator lurking behind Vanessa's beauty was stepping into the light. I returned to my apartment close to midnight. Rain tapped against the windows, but I could not sleep. I sat with the documents spread before me, my son's face smiling from photographs, his handwriting scrawled across letters he had left behind. The ache of his absence gnawed at me, but above it, a sharper edge formed. She thought she had won. She believed she could outwit us all with her lies, her poisons, her forged signatures. But she underestimated the strength of a mother stripped of everything but purpose. I leaned back, whispering to the empty room, "Your mask is slipping, Vanessa, and soon the world will see you for what you are." To everyone listening now, stay with me. The deeper I dug, the more dangerous the truth became. This story is far from over. Like, share, and subscribe, because what comes next will shock you as much as it shattered me. The days that followed blurred into strategy sessions and quiet investigations. Diane worked her network of contacts while I reached out to old allies who had once trusted Michael's vision. Every call, every meeting carried the same undercurrent. Vanessa Hayes might have stolen his legacy on paper, but the truth was unraveling. It was Clara who brought the next revelation. She arrived at Diane's house with a look that told me she carried something heavy. "I've spoken with someone who knew her before Michael," she said. "Laura Fleming, the sister of a man Vanessa once married. We arranged a meeting." Laura was a thin, serious woman, her eyes shadowed by years of unanswered questions. She sat stiffly in Diane's living room, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Edward was my only brother," she began, her voice quiet but steady. "He met Vanessa at a charity gala. Within 3 months, they were married. She swept into his life like a storm. He grew distant, and then one morning he was gone. Heart attack, they said, but he had no history of heart problems." The air thickened. Laura blinked hard, fighting back tears. "I begged the police to investigate, but there was no evidence. He was cremated immediately." She said it was his wish, but I knew better. We had spoken of burial plots near our parents. He never wanted cremation. The parallels were undeniable. Edward's story mirrored Michael's. The sudden illness, the swift death, the convenient inheritance. "There was a man," Laura added after a pause. "Edward introduced him as her cousin, Victor Kane. He was around often toward the end. I thought it was odd the way they looked at each other. Not like family." Diane and I exchanged a glance. Frank had seen Vanessa meet a man in secret. Clara had overheard whispers of ours. Now the name had a face. Victor Kane. We passed the information to Detective Blake. His expression hardened as he made notes. "Victor Kane, former pharmaceutical sales representative. He has a record. Fraud, illegal distribution. If he was supplying her with medication, it could explain everything." The detective leaned back. "This strengthens the case. 2 husbands dead, both leaving fortunes to Vanessa, and a man with medical knowledge at her side. But we'll need more. Hard evidence." The following morning, Dr. Samuel Brooks, who had overseen Michael's autopsy, requested a private meeting. His face was grave as he laid out the reports once more. I believe I missed something in the first examination. Your son's heart condition was mild, manageable. It should not have been fatal. But the toxicology shows levels of medication far beyond what was prescribed. No accidental overdose could explain this. I gripped the arms of my chair, forcing the words out. So someone gave him too much? Dr. Brooks nodded. Deliberately, but that isn't all. I reviewed older blood work. 6 months ago, his tests showed traces of thallium, a compound not included in standard screenings. Tasteless, odorless, it can mimic the symptoms of heart disease when administered slowly over time. Whoever did this was planning it for months. The truth struck like a blade. Michael had been poisoned, his body weakened deliberately until his final collapse seemed inevitable. I left the office trembling, rage and grief woven so tightly I could not tell them apart. Vanessa had not simply stolen his life. She had designed his death. That night, Diane called with another discovery. Gregory Hale didn't just bend under her pressure, she said. His son is deep in debt to dangerous people. Vanessa used that as leverage. He forged the will under her orders. The net was tightening. Vanessa's empire of lies stood on forged signatures, poisoned blood, and blackmail. Yet she carried herself through town as though untouchable, as though she had already won. Late one evening, Frank phoned me with a quiet urgency. Mrs. Carter, I've been going through old records. 3 times last year, I drove her to a storage facility outside of town. She always went alone, told me to wait in the car. I noticed the unit number. The next morning, Detective Blake secured a warrant. Hours later, he called. His voice carried the weight of revelation. Mrs. Carter, we searched the unit. We found vials of thallium, detailed notes on dosage, Michael's medical records with annotations. We also discovered cash and forged passports. She was preparing to flee. I closed my eyes, my hands trembling as relief and sorrow collided. The truth was no longer hidden in whispers and suspicion. It was written in her own hand, stored in the darkness of a rented unit. But even as Vanessa's mask began to crumble, the shadow of Victor Kane loomed larger. He had not been caught, and a predator with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous of all. The rain had not stopped for days, and with every drop tapping the window, my sense of unease grew. Vanessa Hayes was no longer just a widow cloaked in silk and sorrow. She was a predator cornered, and cornered predators lash out. Detective Blake's call came early that morning. "We executed the search warrant on the storage unit," he said. "We've recovered the poison, Michael's medical records marked with her handwriting, and cash prepared for an escape. We've issued an arrest warrant." Relief surged through me, but it lasted only a breath. And Victor Kane? He's still out there, Blake admitted, but we're close. That night, as I returned from Diane's home, headlights flared behind me, too bright, too close. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. The car lingered until I pulled into my building's lot, then peeled away into the dark. I stood frozen by the elevator doors, knowing Vanessa was still watching. She wasn't fleeing. Not yet. The next morning, Clara called, her voice trembling. "She's back at the house, Evelyn." Lights in the study. I saw her through the window. "Oh, stay away," I warned. Call Detective Blake immediately. Within hours, news came that officers had surrounded the estate. Vanessa had been arrested, handcuffed in the very hallways she once strutted through like a queen. The image burned into my mind, her mask stripped away, her empire collapsing in front of flashing lights. But even with her in custody, danger still lingered. Victor Kane had not been caught. His shadow stretched further than I had imagined, and he was desperate now. That evening, Diane and I pored over the letter Michael had left in the care of his assistant, Hannah. His handwriting trembled across the page, dated 2 weeks before his death. "Mom, if you're reading this, I'm afraid something is wrong. I've felt strange lately, confused, forgetful. The doctors say it's stress, but I can't believe that. Vanessa has changed. Sometimes I catch her looking at me with eyes I don't recognize. Cold, calculating. If something happens to me suddenly, please look deeper. I trust you more than anyone. I love you." The words blurred as tears filled my vision. He had known. Somewhere deep inside, he had feared what she was capable of, and he turned to me, his mother, even as he faced death. I pressed the letter to my chest, grief and fury twisting together. Vanessa might have stolen his life, but she would not silence his voice. His words would be the weapon that carried us to justice. Later that night, the crash of breaking glass shattered Diane's kitchen. She shouted, throwing a vase toward the back door. A man fled into the darkness, his shadow vanishing into the trees behind the house. Police sirens wailed within minutes, but the danger was clear. Victor Kane had come for us. We were moved into protective custody, confined to a hotel suite guarded by officers outside the door. The city lights blurred through the rain, and for the first time, true fear settled into my bones. I had stood against Vanessa, uncovered her lies, exposed her poison, but Victor was still free, unpredictable, and violent. It was close to midnight when Detective Blake called. His voice was taut. "We've caught him. He tried to flee in a stolen car, but we intercepted him. He's in custody, and he's talking. He claims Vanessa masterminded everything, that she recruited him for his pharmaceutical knowledge. According to him, Michael wasn't her second victim. He was her third." The truth coiled cold through me. She had been doing this for years, leaving a trail of graves behind her designer heels. By dawn, the headlines screamed across every paper and screen. "The Black Widow of Westlake arrested." Reporters swarmed the courthouse, shouting questions about poisoned husbands, forged wills, stolen fortunes. Her name had become a spectacle, her legacy one of death and deceit. I did not go to the arraignment. I couldn't bear to see her again, not after the destruction she had sown. Instead, I sat at Michael's desk in Diane's study, his letter beside me, and whispered the promise I had made from the beginning. "Your fight is not over, my son. I will carry it until the end." To all who hear my story now, this is where the web begins to collapse. Justice is rising, but the road is not yet finished. Stay with me, like, share, and subscribe, because the final reckoning is near, and the truth will shake everything to its core. The courthouse steps were swarmed with reporters, their voices rising above the traffic, microphones flashing like weapons. Headlines already painted Vanessa Hayes as the Black Widow, a predator who turned love into a trap and husbands into corpses. I stood at a distance, unwilling to walk into the frenzy. She had stolen too much from me already. I would not give her the dignity of my presence. Inside, the hearing moved swiftly. The evidence was overwhelming. Handwritten notes from the storage unit, bottles of poison, the forged will dismantled by handwriting experts, and the testimony of Victor Kane, desperate to save himself by exposing her. Still, Vanessa carried herself with arrogance, her chin lifted, her eyes sharp with defiance. She believed she could outtalk, outmaneuver, outshine even now. But the walls were closing in. Diane sat beside me as the judge ordered a freeze on all assets pending trial. "It's the first step," she whispered, her hand steady over mine. "The foundation is crumbling. She won't walk free from this." That evening, Hannah Reed, Michael's assistant, reached out to me. We met at a quiet cafe away from the glare of cameras. She carried a folder, her hands trembling slightly as she slid it across the table. "Michael asked me to hold this," she said softly. "He told me if anything happened, I should wait 1 month, then give it to you." Inside was a letter, Michael's handwriting slanting across the page, dated 2 weeks before his death. "Mom, if you're reading this, I can't shake the feeling that something is wrong. I've been confused, forgetful. The doctors dismiss it as stress, but I don't believe them. Vanessa has changed. Sometimes she looks at me like I'm already gone. If something happens suddenly, please protect the company. Protect what Dad built. I've left instructions with Gregory, though I'm not certain he can be trusted. Above all, trust yourself. I love you. Your son, Michael." Tears blurred the words. He had known, even in his final days, that the danger was real. He had trusted me with his last defense, his last plea. My grief deepened, but so did my resolve. His death was not in vain. His words would anchor me through every battle to come. Days later, I walked through the house that was once mine, now stripped of Vanessa's possessions. The staff had removed her clothes, her jewelry, her perfumes, leaving only the memories etched into the walls. I moved through each room slowly, as though retracing my life with Michael. His childhood drawings framed in the hallway, the faint pencil marks on the kitchen door frame marking his growth, his books still stacked in the study. In the silence, I allowed myself to grieve fully, no longer stifled by anger or strategy. I wept for the boy who had once run down those halls with boundless laughter, for the man who had fought to expand our legacy, for the son who had trusted the wrong woman with his heart. The district attorney called that afternoon. His tone was brisk but reassuring. "Mrs. Carter, we are pursuing the maximum penalty. With the evidence recovered in Kane's testimony, she will never see freedom again." I thanked him, though words felt thin. Justice was moving forward, but justice could not warm the empty chair at my table. Later that evening, Diane and I sat in her garden with 2 glasses of wine. The roses were just beginning to bloom, their fragrance a soft reminder that life carried on. "To justice," she said, raising her glass. "To Michael," I answered, my voice catching. We drank in silence, the twilight settling over us. The world outside roared with scandal, but here, among the roses, I found a moment of peace. The next morning, I gathered the board of Carter Holdings. Familiar faces filled the room, many of them shaken by the revelations of the past weeks. I stood at the head of the table, Michael's letter in my pocket, his words guiding me. "I will remain as chairperson," I told them, my voice steady, "but I am appointing Robert Chen as CEO. He worked beside Michael for years, and he knows the company better than anyone. As for me, my focus will be elsewhere. I intend to create the Michael Carter Foundation, to honor my son's legacy not just in business, but in the lives we touch." The decision was met with relief, nods of approval. For the first time, I felt the future was not a void but a path, one Michael would have been proud of. That afternoon, I visited his grave for the first time since the funeral. The granite stone gleamed in the sunlight, his name etched deep. I laid a single white rose against it, my hand resting over the cool surface. "We got her, Michael," I whispered. "She'll pay for what she did. And your legacy will live on, not only in the company, but in the foundation that bears your name. You will not be forgotten." A breeze stirred the trees above, carrying with it a strange calm. For the first time since his death, I felt not just grief, but a glimmer of peace. The trial of Vanessa Hayes drew the eyes of the nation. Each day, the courtroom overflowed with journalists, neighbors, and strangers who wanted to see the woman once admired for her beauty and charm face the truth of her crimes. I did not attend every session. My grief was too raw, my heart too heavy. But when the verdict was read, I was there. The judge's gavel struck once, silencing the room. The foreman of the jury stood, unfolding a sheet of paper with trembling hands. "On the charge of first-degree murder, we find the defendant, Vanessa Hayes, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy, guilty." The words hung in the air, sharp and final. Vanessa's face, once so carefully arranged into masks of sorrow and elegance, contorted into fury. She rose, shouting, her voice hoarse, accusing everyone of betrayal. Officers pressed her down, the clink of handcuffs echoing against the marble walls. I watched from the gallery, my hands folded tightly in my lap. I expected triumph, vindication, maybe even joy. Instead, what came was silence, deep, echoing silence. Justice had been served, but justice could not return my son. Outside, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions I had no strength to answer. Diane shielded me as we left, her arms steady at my side. "It's over," she said gently. "She can never hurt anyone again." In the weeks that followed, life began to stitch itself together in fragile patterns. The Michael Carter Foundation was born, its mission to support families affected by medical malpractice and hidden abuse. Letters poured in, stories of people who had suffered in silence, who found courage in Michael's name. Each letter was both a wound and a balm, proof that his death, though cruel, could bring hope to others. One evening, I stood before the board of the foundation, a room filled with donors, survivors, and advocates. My voice trembled at first, but strength rose as I spoke. My son's life was stolen, not by fate, but by cruelty disguised as love. I cannot change what happened to him, but I can fight for those still at risk. This foundation is not just his legacy, it is a promise that no voice will go unheard, no life will be taken in silence. The applause that followed felt like waves, carrying me for the first time since his death. At home, I kept Michael's letter on my nightstand. Some nights I read it again, tracing the familiar lines of his handwriting, hearing his voice in every word. He had trusted me to uncover the truth, and I had done it. I had carried him through the darkness and brought his story into the light. The house on Maple Street was small, humble compared to the mansion where this all began, but it was filled with peace. Clara visited often, bringing laughter back into my days. Frank remained loyal, his steady presence a reminder that loyalty can survive even the darkest betrayals. And Diane, once estranged, had become my closest ally, her strength a lifeline when mine faltered. On the anniversary of Michael's death, I visited his grave once more. The sun was warm, the breeze gentle, and the white rose I laid at his stone seemed to glow against the polished granite. I kept my promise, I whispered. They know who you were. They know what she did, and your name will never fade. I will carry you always. The leaves stirred above me, and though I was alone, I felt his presence in the quiet. Not as grief, not as pain, but as love, enduring, unbreakable. The fight was over, but the story lived on, not as tragedy, but as truth. To those who have walked beside me through this journey, thank you. If my son's story has touched your heart, if it has reminded you of the strength a mother's love can hold, then share it, carry it forward. Let his legacy live in every voice raised against cruelty, every stand taken for justice, because love never dies, and neither does truth.